Hello and welcome back to another episode of MacStories Unwind. I'm John Voorhees, and I've got Federico Vitici with me. Hey, Tici.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm surviving what's been a very topsy-turvy week. I guess happy Apple 50th to you. I think that's the thing you're supposed to do these days.
I was actually more excited about the Artemis II launch than the Apple anniversary.
Yeah.
We watched. So Sylvia is not really into space stuff.
Uh-huh.
I am. Even
I'm
though
not
I
so
don't,
much either, but
yeah, I don't keep up with the news as much as our friend Stephen Hackett does.
yeah.
But like I am so terribly fascinated with all of it, and so I told her, like, can we watch the Artemis II launch together? She's like, yeah, sure.
The romantic evening.
Yeah, and so we were just in bed watching the liftoff, and I was really glad that they were able to take off on the first countdown. They had a 2-hour window for the Artemis II mission. In case you don't know, the Artemis II mission is the first manned mission to not land on the moon. That's going to be Artemis III.
I was a little disappointed to read that, to be honest.
It's gonna be a flyby of the moon, and then they're gonna take advantage of the sort of slingshot effect and use the moon's and the Earth's gravitational pull to slingshot back to Earth in 10 days. If you watch For All Mankind, you should be pretty familiar with a lot of these things. And in fact, it was quite nice that I also started watching season 5 of For All Mankind. And seeing Mission Control in real life on a NASA live stream, that was so funny because I was like, oh yes, that's just from the TV show. And then I remember, well, the TV show is from real life.
Right. Well,
but just hearing the words, 3, 2, 1, and we have liftoff, like that was.
Can I blow your mind, Federico?
Yeah. Okay.
I remember the last time that people landed on the moon. 1972. Wow. I was 6 years old.
And you remember that?
I vaguely. They pulled the TV into I don't know if it was either kindergarten or first grade classroom, and they showed these fuzzy pictures on the screen, and it was wild. Yeah, I vaguely remember it. 1972. It was some of my earliest memories.
Was it black and white TV
still? Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you remember the switch to color TV?
I do, yeah. I think color TV technically existed, but it wasn't. It's like a lot of early technology. It wasn't really in the home because it was too expensive. But yeah, I do. I remember that with TVs with physical buttons and aerials and black and white and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm an old person.
Man, I can. Yeah. You're young in spirit.
I am, but I've seen a lot of tech in my time.
Yeah, I don't know. From my perspective, it's really mind blowing to think that we may be able to see man on the moon again next year. And because in my lifetime I only remember the space shuttle before effectively space exploration was shattered for like 2 decades or something. I remember, what was it, the Challenger exploding? I remember that on TV. And it's just I don't know, just seeing Artemis II go up, and I believe the person that was doing the live commentary on YouTube said humanity's next voyage begins now, or something like that. I don't know. It's always been very poetic to me, the idea of landing on on the moon and eventually maybe on other
exploration
planets.
Of all kinds is a very human thing throughout the ages. Even before it was space, it was across the seas. So
yeah. Anyway, not to derail you, but that's what I did last night. I watched some NASA live streams, and then For All Mankind. But you had, so I guess that's I already spoiled my pick. I started watching For All Mankind. It's very good. I find it so amusing that they're aging the characters, especially they're aging. They keep aging the main guy, and I guess at some point in this season he'll pass away. I mean, do they want to keep this guy around until it's like 100?
They got one more season, right? They're going to do another season, I think, right?
It's going to be a season 6.
Final
so
season,
we'll see. Let's see. Anyway, we're going to talk about your pick later.
We are.
But you had a question.
Yeah, I was thinking about workflows, and I wanted to know, what is your oldest workflow, and what workflows you've been rebuilding recently, because this is something that came up recently for me, because I think probably for me, the answer to this question is, until recently, my podcasting production workflow, because, and I think that's in part because when you and I started App Stories, it was 2017. I actually hadn't left my old job yet, and we were doing it at like 6 a.m. my time, and I had barely the time to learn podcast production. And I got a lot of great, helpful tips and tricks from a lot of our friends who were already doing it. But I basically came to something that worked very quickly and then didn't mess with it because I didn't have the time then. I've never been an audio person in any kind of way. It always made me a little anxious to think about somehow messing up our main show that we were doing at MacStories. And so I just left it alone, literally for, I don't know, almost 9 years. And recently, though, with the help of Claude, I went through and I completely tore it apart. I changed the way I do loudness matching. I automated the end-to-end workflow. I had Claude go out and do deep research on audio engineering boards to critique my settings on every piece of hardware that I use and every software package that I use. And then I built a bunch of tests that could take the sound, the audio files that we produce, and test them and make sure that they were doing what they were supposed to do. And then, use that as another feedback loop to get things to the standard where I wanted them. And I think over time that I have improved that. Now, there were some hiccups along the way, and I did a couple episodes where things might have sounded a little off compared to historically. But in the end, I think I improved it quite a bit, both in terms of the amount of time I have to spend, as well as pushing the quality up a little further than it has been historically, which I was pretty happy about. But there's no way that's one thing where I don't know if I would have ever had the time to comb through audio engineering forums on my own and come up with this, because it's a lot like looking at forums, Reddit, all this stuff. You come up with so many different conflicting advice from people. Yeah. And what's nice about using something like deep research in Claude is I was able to get what was more of a consensus view. And then I was able not only to just get that viewpoint, but actually test it with software so that I could be sure that it was actually doing what it was supposed to do and not just some sort of hallucination or, out there point of view that was being returned to me. So yeah, that's the one that I've done. And I was pretty happy about it just because I don't like to have any workflow in place for 9 years. I feel like I rip them up probably too often sometimes, but that one, it felt good to actually try something different and actually come out the other end with something better.
Yeah, I feel like this is a good question because despite me switching between apps on a regular basis, the workflows stay the same. That's something that when I saw this question, something that I started thinking about is, even if, like, for example, lately I'm playing again with reminders because of something that I'm building. But I've basically recreated my Todoist workflow in reminders. Like some things, there are some projects, for example, that I like to see with a Kanban view. Or, for example, this is a very particular workflow. I have an automation that creates a new project or a new list in reminders for next week's issue of the MacStories weekly newsletter. So first of all, the automation is the same. It just runs on a regular basis. And instead of using Todoist, it uses reminders, but it's the same workflow. And it creates the same tasks and the same sections. And something that I do in either Todoist or reminders, that's, the data portability there is basically perfect because I'm just recreating the same workflow in a different space.
Right.
I have parent tasks for interesting links and app debuts. And I have the same shortcuts for Todoist and reminders. Again, the workflow is the same. That save either an interesting link or an app debut as a subtask of that parent task. And it works the same way in Todoist, and it works the same way in reminders. Another example of a fixed workflow that stays the same regardless of the application that I'm using is how I compile the iOS review on an annual basis. I have used Obsidian, I have used Notion, I have used Drafts, but the underlying automation, whether it's a shortcut or an Obsidian plugin or a Notion API thing, it's the same workflow. I like to have my chapters as individual files or pages, and I like to have my sections inside those chapters.
Right.
And at the end, there's a script or there's a shortcut or there's a plugin that takes them all together, applies the MacStories syntax, and compiles the entire review. That workflow has stayed the same for like 5 years. It just... Now, thanks to AI, I can recreate what used to be an Obsidian plugin. I can recreate it as a shortcut. I can recreate it as a script. It doesn't matter. It's the same workflow, just in different apps.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on it, because what I think I was getting at in my question wasn't so much maybe changing the underlying workflow, but changing the steps of the underlying workflow, which is what you are doing. You are changing the steps. You're not changing the steps, you're changing the tools, I guess is what you're changing.
Changing the tools, but the steps, because I think it's important to realize I like to do things a certain way. And so the app, the tool that I'm using should behave like I want it to behave, right? And there's a bigger topic here, I guess, about this concept of malleable software now. Sort of this software that can bend and shape to your will, right? So apps like Obsidian or Drafts or Notion or Todoist, and to an extent even Reminders is surprisingly customizable now.
Yep.
You can set them up just the way you want them to be set up, whereas I would say for more old school types of software, like Things by Culture Code or IA Writer, for example, those are like opinionated apps that really resonate with some people. But for people like me, and I guess for people like you, maybe, John, we have our workflows and we like to shape these applications exactly how we want them to be shaped.
Right.
That's why some people like the opinionated design or the friction of those apps. But for me, the most important part is my workflow. I like to do things a certain way. I want to be able to hit Command K on my keyboard and insert a markdown link on the selected text.
Yeah.
And no matter the text editor that I'm using, if I cannot hit Command K to insert the link from my clipboard, then it's not good enough. That to me.
Yeah. No, it is to me too. And I think what I am actually describing in talking about my podcasting workflow is exactly the same thing that you were describing, in that I have changed the tools by adding scripts and replacing things like Adobe Premiere with scripts that use things like FFmpeg. I haven't really changed the process. The process and the workflow remains the same, which is record, process, edit, export. That those steps remain the same, and ultimately what I'm trying to accomplish remains the same. But the tools have changed over time, and I think that's a good way of looking at it, because I was thinking of it as a change in the workflow, but it's really a change in the tools that have become are more adaptable to in my current system than they were before, which I like, because that gives me that comfort that yes, I can, if I want to change something out later in the future, I can do that now a lot easier than I used to.
Yeah. So, what's your pick?
So I got a quick pick for everybody. It is Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. Now, I had no idea what this movie was, but it is a comedy that stars one of the guys who was in the movie about the BlackBerry. Do you remember the movie that came out about the BlackBerry a couple of years ago?
Yes, and I didn't see it. Yeah,
it's a pretty good movie actually, but this is a time travel movie. It's a comedy. It's two guys who are musicians and one guy always has harebrained ideas on ways that they can get themselves more popular than they are. And the other guy is a talented pianist. And it's a bit of a buddy movie. And it starts with them climbing up to the top of the CN Tower in Toronto and parachuting down to try to parachute down onto a baseball stadium field during a game because they think that will get them enough publicity to get a gig at a local bar. And they parachute down and they land on the roof because the roof, the retractable roof had been closed before they reached the roof. And it goes from there to the guy with the crazy ideas thinking he can build a time machine. And you know what? He does build a time machine. And they go forward and back in time, kind of reliving parts of their life, kind of addressing their regrets, but also their triumphs. And in the end, it's a really kind of touching story about two friends and what their friendship means more than anything else. But along the way, it's very funny, and I love the time travel angle of it all. So definitely recommend it. It's one of those kind of small budget indie type movies that you may not have come across before, but it's well worth your time.
Okay. All right.
All right, everybody. That's it for this week's episode of MacStories Unwind. Be sure to check out Federico's pick too. That was For All Mankind, which we kind of did in a weird order today, but great series, of course, and got one more season to go next year, maybe 2 years from now. Who knows? Yeah. We'll see. But that's it. Look for the MacStories Unwind deal in the show notes too. We are at MacStories.net and on social media, so just look for us there, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye, Federico.
Going back to the moon, John.
All right. Take care.